Hello, everyone. I've got Amy Stanton, the CEO and founder of Stanton Company, along with she is also the co-author of The Feminine Revolution. We're going to have a great discussion, so stick around. You don't want to miss this episode.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amy, it's exciting to me to be able to talk a little bit about women and women's issues. There has never been a time in my life when I remember these issues being more front and center. Even back in the 70s, you're not old enough to remember that, but I am. Back in the 70s when the ERA was Equal Rights Amendment was a hot topic. We really didn't talk about women's issues nearly as much as we have over the last year, with a great crescendo here in recent weeks during the Kavanaugh crisis, as I've come to call it. But you are a real powerful woman, CEO and founder of her own business. You work largely for women. You've written about women in the feminine revolution. I sit at your feet. I am prepared to learn. Explain to me all of the women's issues here. Let's put a finer point on it. Tell us about your work at Stanton Company for women.
Great. So first of all, I could not agree with you more that now is a time more than ever that we need to be talking about women, women's rights, how we can support women, how women can support each other. I founded my business about 12 years ago, originally focused in the women's sports space because that was an opportunity that nobody had tapped into. No one was focused on female athletes in women's sports. Everyone said, Amy, you're crazy. There's no money in women's sports. That only made me want to do it more. So I built an agency focused on promoting female athletes, working with brands, activating the women's sports space. It pretty quickly evolved to be more focused in a broader, healthy, active living space. So probably mirroring my own personal interests, but still lots of brands targeting women, built by women, not exclusively, but that's been a huge piece of our business. And so I've been able to continue to work with a number of very powerful women, helping them build their platforms, helping them get their messages out there and inspiring others. And that has been an exciting opportunity. And it's incredible when I think about how much the women's landscape has changed since I started the business 12 years ago.
How has it changed? What do you see different over the last 12 years?
Well, that is a list that we could certainly not cover during the span of this particular talk. But one of the big things that's changed is there are more positive female role models than ever. We're seeing more women that have been elevated, whether that's in politics or business or sports, really across industries. And it's just the beginning. So as much as that's great progress, I think at the same time, we can certainly see how many issues there are facing women now, politically especially. And there's so many moments that it's sort of hitting us in the face. So we feel like there's so many important conversations going on around feminism and equal rights and female empowerment. And what we saw as an opportunity was a brand new conversation around femininity. No one was talking about femininity. And instead of looking at all the social and political and cultural issues, we said, let's take a look at ourselves and let's look at the gifts that we may possess that we may not be using because we perceive femininity to be weak because society has perceived it to be weak. So that's why we wrote The Feminine Revolution, to really turn that idea that femininity is a weakness on its head and show that femininity and all these feminine qualities like emotionality and sensitivity and vulnerability, even crying openly, that those are actually our superpowers.
Interesting. Give us an example of how you would make that point in any one of those topics.
So a great example is sensitivity. I think I'm not alone as a woman who from a young age was told, you're too sensitive. I was told that by family members. And then when I entered the workplace working in advertising in big ad agencies in New York City, bosses would tell me, Amy, you're being too sensitive. And so what did that do? That, if anything, probably made me armor up, toughen up, and feel like in order to thrive, I'm going to need to be tougher. I'm going to need to be stronger. And certainly didn't let me think in a positive light about my sensitivity. If anything, quite the opposite. Now, many years later, I'm not told as often that I'm sensitive. And maybe that's one of the reasons I felt like I should write this book. But I see sensitivity in a whole new light, which is that actually it's my sensitivity that makes me as good as I am at being a leader, at interacting with our clients, at understanding what people's needs are, at taking care of my employees. Those are really oftentimes a function of the fact that I can sense and experience things in a more powerful way. And so people often say, now that you're writing this book, what are the things that you hope will come of it? Well, obviously, I'm hoping a conversation will be sparked and that change will be a result of that conversation. But specifically, I hope someday when I have a daughter and someone says to her, you're being too sensitive, that she can say thank you.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about how the book came about. When did you first start thinking about writing the book, and what triggered it?
I think most of these things stem from personal experience. So I've been told, and I think certainly the case in my case. About 4, maybe almost 5 years ago, I started thinking about this. And I think it was a result of my own personal journey. I was for many years a workaholic. Work was definitely what came naturally to me. I developed a group of skills and style that was really effective in the workplace, sometimes influenced by some of probably my most powerful bosses were men, and the directness and assertiveness and these also powerful attributes I learned from them. And I started wondering if because of that and this toughness that I had developed, which was serving me, or so I thought, in the workplace, maybe that was negatively affecting my romantic relationships. And maybe the guys that I was dating didn't love the fact that I was so bossy. I'm not saying I was. This is a hypothetical. This is
purely hypothetically.
Purely hypothetical. And I didn't love this feeling that in so many relationships I felt like I was in control, but I realized I had sort of set the table for that. So I started wondering if because of this journey in my work and that had been such a huge influence in developing the adult me, maybe I'd lost touch with some of my softer, more sensitive sides. And the truth is I'm mush, I am really sensitive. I'm a crier. Just before this podcast, I was crying, for what it's worth. It's true. I confess. But I used to be ashamed by it. I used to feel like that was a weakness and that was something I needed to work on, something I needed to address. And now I see from a bigger picture perspective that I'm not alone. So many women have had the same type of experience. I started talking to lots of women about it. Lots of women were feeling this conflict between feeling like they needed to operate like men to thrive in a man's world. And it makes perfect sense, of course, because for the longest time, leaders were men. So our models were men. So what we thought was successful were the more masculine qualities. I'm certainly not saying abandon the masculine qualities. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here, but it is about introducing or reintroducing or embracing, reclaiming these feminine qualities. So you have a balance. So it's okay. You can still be tough and powerful and strong, but also be sensitive and emotional and mothering. And so, yeah, I'd say my personal experience really sent me on this journey. And so I met Catherine about 4.5 years ago through a mutual friend. we had a great talk, and we felt like we could talk for hours. And she's brilliant and an academic. So I'm a marketer. She's an academic by background, and then was a strategist at Disney working on a lot of the women's properties. And so we brought different perspectives, but a shared perspective about the importance of this conversation. And years went by, and every year I said, this is the year. This is the year. Look at what's going on in the world. This is the year. And then last spring we sat down again, and I thought, why don't we just do this together? So I said, Catherine, let's just do it together. And so we did. So we wrote our proposal. We got on a timeline. We said to the publisher, this has to come out in 2018. It's the most important thing. And guess what? It's coming out on election day. So yes, in fact, it all came together.
That's good. Should men learn to be more feminine?
I think femininity is as important for men as it is for women. And whether it's a learned thing or whether it's something that can be brought up the same way it is, I think we're all a combination of masculine and feminine. And we have the opportunity to be more of certain things in certain times and occasions. I think men have certainly had challenges where they felt like they weren't allowed to be vulnerable. And society hasn't welcomed that. And again, if you ask me, I think one of the biggest problems we have in this society right now is the toxic masculinity that has sort of gotten out of control in a way that creates an opportunity for us to have a conversation about bringing feminine power to complement it and to help kind of create some balance in the world. So I think the two work hand in hand. I think that it's as important for us as women to have an opportunity to be feminine as for men to be able to have that conversation.
Amy, as you look back on your career, what are you most proud of having accomplished?
Well, I always wanted to start my own business. My grandfather was my ultimate inspiration in so many things. I would say in life, he was really my mentor. And he built his business from nothing. He built his life for our family and to provide. And came from the South, had incredible values. He was in the Air Force. He's a combination of so many amazing things. And so I think because of my grandfather and then both of my parents have started businesses, I had this belief that anything's possible. At some point I would start my own business. And I'd say I'm most proud of having actually done that. But the truth is the business was the beginning of a bigger thing. And the book is the next phase. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm still obviously running a business, and the two things really go hand in hand because there's so much alignment between what we're doing in our business and some of the things we're talking about in the book. But I'm proud of having created this, and I have 10 employees, and I always feel proud of being able to put food on the table for them. And even when times are tough, that's the thing that's probably the most important to me, is to keep it up and running and take care of the people. So I'm proud of that for now. And then let's have this conversation again in a couple of years and see if it's the same answer.
Amy, what's the most important lesson you've learned, especially as it relates to women, as you've been going through your career and writing this book?
Well, the whole premise of the feminine revolution is really about allowing women to be themselves. So every woman will define femininity in their own way. And that's part of what's so interesting and exciting about it. So I think the biggest lesson is that ultimately, as much as it may be a journey to get there, we have to figure out who we are and show up that way. And that's the only way we're going to thrive in life. And we can try to be who we think people want us to be or who we think we should be for whatever reasons. But at the end of the day, the biggest priority should be figuring out who we are and then stepping forward.
As you developed your practice as a marketing professional, as a PR professional, focusing on women's issues, women businesses. As you think back, why was it important for you to put so much energy on and for women?
It's so funny you ask that. I honestly just feel that it was meant to be that way. I was drawn to it. It occurred to me and felt purposeful, and it's always been important to me to do things that, if I'm going to invest so much time and energy in my work, it's important that it feel like it's making a difference in some way. That's always been sort of front and center for me. And at one point I was running the marketing and PR for New York's Olympic bid, and that's probably what opened my eyes to how incredible it is when you're doing something that feels like it can be transformative, because we were doing that right after 9/11. It was a time when the hope of the Olympic bid was really one of the things that brought New York City back together. So I realized at that time that we can choose to do work that has meaning, and that is meaning to us, whatever that may be. So I think somehow the pull, clearly there was an opportunity, clearly there was a need, and clearly I could see lots of women needed support and help and inspiration and role models, and it just called to me and said, this is what you're supposed to do. And then the book was sort of the next phase of that. So someone's got a plan for me, and I'm just along for the ride.
So Amy, what is your superpower?
What is my superpower? I mean, we just established that my femininity is my superpower. I think that's the easy answer. But I do think that another piece of that, which is related, is we have a chapter on intuition, and each of our chapters talk about something that's been diminished or perceived as weak or even perceived as negative. In this case, intuition has long been associated with the feminine, often dismissed as woo-woo. Generally executives can't walk into a conference room full of men especially and say, I'm just going to go with my gut on this without any other evidence. So we talk about why intuition is so powerful and why it is a superpower. I think it's been one of the greatest gifts is actually leaning into my intuition and not feeling like I need to second guess myself. Kind of relates to what we were just talking about, actually knowing yourself. But when you trust your gut, it's almost always right. And so big practice is figuring out how to hear it. But I think my intuition is pretty strong, and I often know things before they happen and know solutions to problems before it's apparent, which is sometimes a bit exhausting, truthfully, because you still have to bring everyone else along for the ride. But I urge everyone to kind of take advantage of their own intuition, because I think it could be a superpower for all of us.
That's great. Well, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, would you take just a minute to tell people how they can learn more about Stanton Company, how they can find your book, The Feminine Revolution, and how they can connect with you personally?
Thank you. So our company website is stanton-company.com. I'm on social media, Amy K. Stanton on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And the book is available everywhere. And I hope people will run out and buy it, because I'd love to hear what everyone thinks. And we're excited to spread the word.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. We wish you every success with your new book.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to speak with you.
All right, let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. Devin Thorpe's mission is to end extreme poverty, improve global health, and mitigate climate change before 2045 by finding and sharing the stories of those who are doing the most good. You can join with other listeners to accelerate Devin's mission by visiting helpdevin.org right now.